The sleeping city was dominated by a dark and stormy night. The rain fell incessantly, turning the empty streets into muddy rivers. The municipal market, normally a busy and picturesque place during the day, was enveloped in a somber silence, broken only by the sound of water running down gutters and dripping from empty stalls. Sarah, a dark-haired young woman who worked at the market during the day, was there for a reason that had haunted her since her last visit. She looked around with wary eyes, looking for any sign of life that night. There was something deeply unsettling about the transformation of the market at night. What during the day was a vibrant place full of color now revealed itself as a desolate scene where shadows dominated. Sarah followed the damp corridors, keeping her flashlight close to light the way. With each step, his heart seemed to beat faster. She was completely alone, and the loneliness of the night enveloped her like an icy blanket. Every drop of rain that fell echoed in his mind as a grim reminder of his vulnerability. The young girl finally approached her tent, which was strangely empty. There was something she needed to get back before she left, something she couldn't leave behind. When he reached the tent, he looked inside, the dim light of the flashlight revealing abandoned boxes and shelves. The absence of life seemed to weigh on her. As he rummaged through the boxes, his fingers brushed against something on the floor. It was a faded photograph of his grandmother, smiling happily next to a pile of fresh fruit at the stand. A lone tear mixed with the rain falling from the roof of the tent, and Sarah smiled fondly at the image. Her grandmother used to run the stall before her, and that was the last reminder she had of her. With the photograph carefully tucked away in her pocket, Sarah felt it was time to leave. However, as he turned to leave, a slender figure emerged from the shadows. His footsteps were silent, almost ethereal, as he approached Sarah. The young woman froze in place, the flashlight shaking in her hand. His eyes widened in fear as the figure finally emerged completely from the shadows. It was a stranger wearing a hooded cloak, his face hidden in the shadows of the hood. The stranger didn't say a word, just stared at Sarah with dark eyes, visible only as two black orbs. His gaze seemed penetrating, as if searching for something within her. The silence that surrounded them was frightening, interrupted only by the sound of rain hitting the empty tents. Sarah couldn't contain the tremor in her voice when she finally broke the silence. "Who are you? What are you doing here at night?" The stranger remained motionless, making no sound or movement. His cloak was soaked with rain, and the water ran down it like black tears. The young girl was starting to panic. She knew she shouldn't be there at that time of night, that something was deeply wrong. He needed to get out of there as quickly as possible, but the hooded figure blocked his only escape route. Sarah took an unsteady step back, but as she did so, she tripped and fell to the muddy ground. The flashlight slipped out of his hands and rolled away, extinguishing itself when it hit a puddle of water. The hooded figure knelt beside her, its dark orbs fixed on Sarah. His silence was terrifying, and the young woman could not imagine what he wanted or what might happen next. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was fear, but Sarah felt mesmerized by the figure's empty eyes. As if under a spell, she reached out with a trembling hand towards something the stranger held in his skeletal hand. The object in the stranger's hands glowed dimly in the flashlight before being placed in Sarah's palm. It was a silver medallion, adorned with strange engraved runes. As the young girl looked at the locket, she felt captivated, as if she were being drawn into the unknown. What will happen next? What does the mysterious medallion mean? And who is the hooded stranger who seems to have emerged from the market's own shadows? Answers await in the next parts of this terrifying story in the municipal market at night. The silver locket was now in Sarah's possession, and a strange, unsettling feeling of power spread through her body. She couldn't look away from the object, whose runes seemed to move like snakes around the medallion. The runes were ancient and mysterious, and Sarah couldn't decipher them. The hooded figure, still silent, smiled. His smile was more of a sinister grimace, revealing worn, yellowed teeth. He closed his slender fingers over the locket. The stranger's touch was cold as ice. As soon as the locket was sealed around his neck, the feeling of hypnosis disappeared. Sarah regained control of her movements, but was paralyzed by fear. She tried to get up, but the stranger quickly moved away, retreating into the shadows of the stormy night. Before disappearing completely, the stranger uttered unintelligible words. a hissing murmur that echoed in Sarah's mind. She didn't understand the words, but she felt that something terrible had happened. With the stranger gone into the shadows, Sarah was now alone again, with the mysterious locket hanging around her neck. The young woman desperately tried to remove the medallion, but it was fixed like an anchor. She pulled, twisted, and even tried to break the silver chain, but nothing worked. The object was as if it were part of her, an extension of her own being. The rain continued to fall outside, and the market, which had once been empty, began to come to life. The empty stalls filled with fresh, appetizing wares, as if they had been transported from an active market. Fruits and vegetables seemed to glow with vitality, and fresh meat was displayed on refrigerated counters. Sarah found herself surrounded by a reality that defied logic. The market had transformed, as if it had gone back in time to its glory days. She tried to scream, but her voice sounded muffled, as if it were a part of the nightmare that enveloped her. Desperate to escape, she ran towards the market doors, but they were locked. What should have been the way out was now an insurmountable barrier. The wooden doors were heavy and sturdy, and not even his strength could open them. Sarah was trapped in a night market, a place that couldn't be real. The shadows of the tents seemed to dance around him, whispering unintelligible secrets into his mind. The young woman was trapped, with no hope of escaping. The hooded figure that had cursed her was still somewhere, watching her from afar with its empty eyes. What did he want with her? Why had he cursed her like that? These questions echoed in Sarah's mind as she faced the consequences of her encounter that dark night. The days turned into nights, and Sarah remained trapped in the enchanted market. The silver medallion was sealed around his neck, like a magical shackle that could not be broken. She didn't age, she didn't feel hungry or thirsty, but her mind was slowly deteriorating as the days dragged on in that distorted reality. The shadows of the tents seemed to take on a life of their own at night, dancing around her as they whispered unspeakable secrets. The hissing voices invaded his dreams, filling his mind with terrifying images. She saw pale, empty faces among the shadows, all of them looking at her with lifeless eyes. The hooded figure that had cursed her appeared occasionally, watching her from afar with his piercing, silent gaze. He seemed content with Sarah's fate, as if she were just another prisoner in his night kingdom. Sarah tried to maintain her sanity, but loneliness and isolation began to eat away at her mind. She talked to the shadows, trying to find some comfort in their presence. But the shadows were treacherous, and their hissing whispers seemed to defy reality itself. Sometimes Sarah felt like she was losing track of time. The days and nights blended together, becoming a blurred landscape of darkness and melancholy. She tried to mark the days by scratching the ground with stones, but the lines were erased by the shadows before she could tell the time. One day, when the market was plunged into the gloom of eternal night, Sarah caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure approaching. She recognized the stranger's hood and empty eyes. He was back, and Sarah felt her heart race with fear. The stranger approached slowly, his cloak soaked with rain and his footsteps silent as a ghost. When he finally stood before her, his voice echoed in Sarah's mind, but without moving his lips. "You are now a part of this market, Sarah. A part that will never leave." What did the stranger mean by those words? What did it mean to be a part of the market? The shadows around them seemed to twitch, as if they were eager to witness what would happen next. Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. She didn't want to be part of that cursed market. He wanted to return to his life, his family, and his reality. But now, it seemed like all of that was out of his reach. The stranger walked away, retreating into the shadows of the market. The shadows seemed to close in around her, and she was alone once again, surrounded by darkness and the unsettling whisper of the shadows. And so, the days dragged on at that night market, and Sarah found herself trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The hooded figure still watched her, silent and implacable, as she faced the price of her curiosity that fateful night. What does fate have in store for Sarah in this cursed market? Is there any hope of escaping this nocturnal kingdom? The answers remain hidden in the shadows that shroud this terrifying story. Months have passed since Sarah was trapped in the cursed market. She was trapped in that distorted reality where time seemed to lose all meaning. The shadows of the tents continued to dance around her, whispering unfathomable secrets, and the hooded figure watched her silently from afar. The young woman had given up counting the days and nights. She had resigned herself to her condition, accepting that she might never escape this nightmare again. The silver locket, which was now part of her, was the only connection to the reality she knew. But his presence was suffocating, a constant reminder of his imprisonment. One night, when the market was enveloped in its eternal darkness, Sarah felt a different presence. It wasn't the hooded figure, but something else, something emanating from the shadows with an unearthly intensity. She looked around, trying to understand what was going on. The shadows seemed to come together, forming a dark, fluid mass that writhed before her. They rose from the ground like a living being, taking shape before his incredulous eyes. A dark and imposing figure emerged from the shadows, revealing itself as a being of pure darkness, faceless, with no defined form. The shadowy figure began to speak, but his voice was a cacophony of murmurs and whispers, as if all the shadow voices were merging into one. Sarah tried to understand the words, but they were like indecipherable riddles. "You have been chosen, Sarah," said the shadowy figure, his voice echoing in her mind. "The market is hungry for souls, and you offered yours when you accepted the medallion. Now you are a part of the market, a guardian of the shadows." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't chosen to be part of that cursed market, but now she was tied to it in ways she didn't understand. She was a shadow keeper, but what did that mean? The shadowy figure continued to speak, revealing the truth behind the night market. The place was a meeting point for shadow beings, a refuge for creatures and entities that did not belong to the world of the living. The market fed on the souls of those trapped there, growing in power as it accumulated more shadow guardians. Sarah was the latest guardian of the shadows, an unwilling prisoner of this nocturnal realm. The silver locket was the link that tied her to the market, a symbol of her unwanted commitment. She didn't know how or why she'd been chosen, but now she was trapped in this dark role. The shadowy figure offered Sarah a choice, even though she knew her options were limited. She could continue to serve as a shadow guardian, perpetuating the power of the night market, or she could attempt to sever the bond with the silver medallion. However, liberation would be difficult and dangerous, as the market did not easily liberate those within its domain. With a heavy heart, Sarah made her decision. She didn't want to be a shadow guardian, feeding the market with her very existence. She wanted to return to her life, her family, and the light of day. She accepted the challenge to break the bond with the silver medallion, regardless of the consequences. The shadowy figure melted away into the shadows, leaving Sarah alone to face her impossible task. She looked at the silver locket, which was shining dimly in the moonlight. With determination, she began to look for a way to break the link that imprisoned her. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, as Sarah worked tirelessly to unlock the secret of the silver locket. She studied the runes engraved on it, recited incantations, and explored the shadows of the market for clues. Finally, after countless trials and errors, she made a discovery. The silver medallion was linked to an ancient ritual, a ritual that allowed the market to consume the souls of its guardians. With this discovery came the key to breaking the bond. Sarah began the ritual, using the locket as her focus. The shadows stirred around him, resisting his attempt to break the bond. But she persisted, determined to regain her freedom. As the ritual reached its climax, the silver medallion trembled and shattered into fragments of light. Sarah felt a burst of energy, followed by a vortex of shadows that enveloped her. She was being ripped away from the night market and back to reality. Sarah woke up in her room, lying in her own bed, as if she had emerged from a long nightmare. The silver medallion was gone, and the cursed market seemed like a distant memory. However, shadows continued to haunt his dreams, whispering unfathomable secrets. She knew the market was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next prey. But now, Sarah was determined to ensure no one else fell into their terrifying clutches. She had become the shadow guardian she refused to be. And so ends the story of the night market, a place of nightmares and dark secrets, and of a young woman who challenged its dominance. Reality and the supernatural intertwine in the shadows, creating a terrifying narrative that will continue to haunt those who hear it.